Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show right here on the Voice of College Football Clemson channel. Thank you so much for joining me. I am, as always, your host, Tiger Paul Craven. Got my boy Jordan Bowman in the back. He'll be joining us momentarily. But before we get into tonight's show, if you are not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. We're trying to grow the channel on our way to 5,000, getting pretty close to it. So help us out and subscribe. Also, this is a live video, so the likes really help us out on the live video. So while you're in here, get your comments in, get your questions in, but go ahead and hit that like button for us as well. And as always, we have the super chat feature available. If you would like to support the show in that way, all of that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you guys so much for being here. There wouldn't be a show without you. But without further ado, let me bring on my co-host, Jordan Bowman. Jordan, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing good, man. Doing good. I had a really busy week, but it was kind of stressful in a lot of ways, but it was very much worth it, considering some of the news and excitement going on around Clemson football this week. So just excited to talk about it, man. We're in full off-season mode now.
Absolutely, man. It is full steam ahead into off season. We got a ton to talk about in tonight's show. A ton of recruiting to get into. We got Elite Junior Day coming up on Saturday. The ACC finally releases the schedule with the additions of Cal, Stanford, and SMU. So we got all that to talk about. Clemson's schedule tonight. But let's go ahead and get a shout out to the comment section before we get started tonight. We got 14 people in the live chat. John Saren's already got in here with the comment. Thank you so much, everybody who's joined. So like I said before, a ton of recruiting to get into tonight. I think first and foremost, where I want to start is kind of the interesting storyline with Bryant, Wesco, and TJ Moore, right? They kind of flip-flopped on us. We've talked a lot, particularly about those two guys for the 2024 class, just because of some of the gaps that are in the wide receiver room and what we think these two potential players could be coming into Clemson and how electrifying we think both of them are. But it's pretty interesting what happened to them in the final ranking. Or the final adjustment to the rankings that will be made for the 2024 class, and they kind of flip-flop. So everybody knows Brian Wesco was a 5-star for probably the past year. He's been a 5-star. TJ Moore was a 4-star. Now TJ Moore has climbed in the ranks all the way up to number 21 from 102 nationally. And Brian Wesco has dropped down to a 4-star. He went from 25 nationally to 57th overall nationally. So what's kind of your thoughts on what happened there? What do you think played into that? Was it kind of the all-star games that they participated in? And was it, TJ Moore's amazing all-star game that we outlined in detail on this channel about how well he played? And, sometimes those all-star games are hit or miss. It depends on who you're playing with and stuff like that. So what do you think went into these drastic changes in these rankings so late in the recruiting cycle?
Yeah, man. With these types of things, with the recruiting movement up and down as far as the rankings are concerned, like I don't put too much stock into it, but there's a lot of different reasons guys rise and a lot of different reasons guys drop. I'll start with TJ Moore because his was more of he showed up and was better than what people expected him to be. That was really the biggest thing, like especially in a lot of these camps and the All-Star game, the All-American Bowl especially, he really showed out. He came in, he in both the games and in drills and looked far more impressive than what their initial impression of him was. His not even just his play on the field, but his measurables. They thought he came in bigger and taller than they thought he was, and faster than they thought he was. Mm-hmm. And so all of that it kind of came in. It was like, wow, this guy looks like a 5-star, top 30 player in the country. Like you and I have both agreed, like this is a 5-star talent that we're talking about. So this was a more of a TJ he was a guy that was misevaluated for a long time because he hadn't been at a ton of these camps, and obviously hasn't gotten as much exposure being in Florida, where there's a million different guys that they're constantly keeping track of and looking at. So TJ kind of got lost in the mix, but when he showed up and showed out against some of the best talent in the country, it was obvious we need to give this guy a huge bump. So I think with him it was more of a he's a lot better than we thought he was. And then I think with Wesco, I think the biggest thing is you guys have to remember that guys drop in the rankings not necessarily because they played poorly or because they didn't look good, but sometimes guys behind them and guys that or guys that were kind of like a TJ Moore that were kind of underscouted. They just they rise up ahead of them, and it's not because of it's not necessarily because Wesco looked poorly. Because from everything I saw, he played very well at both I'm already forgetting. It wasn't the All American Bowl; it was the other one, and then also, he was also at the Polynesian Bowl as well, and had plays. But he didn't necessarily pop as much as some of the lower ranked guys, and that tends to happen. This late in the cycle, the guys that tend to show out more are the guys that are going to get bumped. So he wasn't dropped because he played bad. It was because other guys played better. And it's not. And as John Sarian points out, recruiting is not science. It's more of an art. Recruiting, ranking, and evaluation. It's a really tough thing to do. So, you don't really put too much stock in it. And I think as far as 24/7 Sports is concerned, I think in the composite rankings, Wesco is still a 5-star. They dropped him in their own in-house rankings, but I think but the industry still consensus-wise considers him a 5-star talent. So I wouldn't put too much stock into it. That's just kind of how these things go sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, I could care less who's a 5-star or who's a 4-star. Both of them 4 stars, both of them 5 stars. Honestly, at the end of the day, those stars are not going to help you play any better on the field. When the time comes and you're between the lines and you're going against these other teams and these defenses, it doesn't matter how many stars you had or didn't have. You got to win the matchup that you're lined up across. So I think these two guys are going to be essential guys for years to come for the Clemson offense, and I think they're going to greatly impact this wide receiver room in a very positive way. So couldn't be more excited for them. Glad that TJ Moore got his 5 stars or his 5th star. Brian Wesco, there's no sweat off the back. It is what it is. He'll be just fine. I could promise you that. And I would doubt that he's even worried about dropping at all in the rankings. He's locked into Clemson, and he's going to have a huge impact. He's heading into spring practice, so if he's focused and ready, which I have no reason to think that he wouldn't. He's all about learning the playbook right now and getting into that weight room, putting on the weight that he needs, and getting ready to strap it up for the Tigers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to point out one thing. When it comes to these sorts of things, I know of a guy in last year's freshman class that dropped really late in the cycle, and was a borderline 5-star by the end of the cycle, and his name was Peter Woods. So
he did.
I think it's really hard to put too much stock into these rankings a lot of times. I just you saw Peter Woods go out there, and there's not a defensive tackle in that class that me personally that I would take over him.
And absolutely.
The ones you could argue might also be in the class with him. Mm-hmm. So that tells you how good of Clemson's defensive line haul last cycle, but also just how good Peter Woods ended up being, and how spectacular he was just as a freshman. So I think Wesco could, I think Wesco could have that same impact. I know some people think he needs time but I don't know. I think he has. I think he has more instant impact ability than maybe we're thinking. And obviously we think the world of TJ Moore, and I think he's going to be an instant impact guy. So I think Clemson got two studs at wide receiver, and it's going to be. I think it's going to be really exciting to get these guys in.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. IDK James gets in and says, are they early enrollees? Brian Wesco is an early enrollee. TJ Moore will be a summer enrollee. So
Correct.
we split those guys. So Brian Wesco will be here or is in Clemson
He is
now.
here. Yeah, he's already taking classes.
Already taking classes, about to start spring practice. And
I know a couple of people that are in one of his athletic leadership class.
Oh,
So,
yeah?
Yeah, it's taught by who is it? Rich Yergin. So
Okay.
that's cool. Former Clemson player. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, he's already on campus and grinding away at school, and I'm sure he's grinding away in that Clemson football facility as well. So, and then we'll see TJ Moore in the summertime. His school unfortunately does not allow early graduation, so he's got to do his full senior year, and then he'll come to Clemson in the summer. But let's go ahead and shift gears to a 2025 recruit. Somewhat of a surprise that hit Clemson this week. Good news. Great news, even. And Watford, 6'5", 220 out of Norfolk, Virginia, committed to the Tigers, being recruited by a lot of different schools. But he goes ahead of Elite Junior Day, which is going to be this Saturday, and shuts down his recruitment, commits to the Tigers, goes public with it, I think, yesterday. What were your thoughts when the news broke that he was going to be a Tiger and he was shutting down his recruitment?
Well, the first thing was obviously surprise. There wasn't a whole lot of buildup leading into his commitment. There was some sentiment that Ari Watford was going to. I think that he was going to Clemson was going to put the full press on him this weekend, and they felt like they were in a good position. But he decided not to wait. So it was a nice surprise yesterday. While I was working, I got the notification. Hayes Fawcett put out the tweet, and so that was really, really cool, and that's really exciting heading into an Elite Junior Day, which we're going to dive more into later, where you have a lot of star-studded guys, and you already have 8 commitments now in this class, and so I think that's a really, really big deal. So it was really exciting, and this guy is an elite talent. Considered the first or second edge rusher in the class, depending on where you look. Number 1 player in the state of Virginia. The guy has all the tools. He reminds me a lot of Cleveland Farrell at this point in his recruitment. Cleveland Farrell, he's 230 pounds, so he's not the biggest of defensive linemen and or edge prospects, and that's kind of what Cleveland Farrell was coming out of high school. A little bit undersized, but the athleticism, the speed, and the power are all there. And Clemson continues to do work in the state of Virginia. If you look at Clemson's class right now, they have 4 commitments from the state of Virginia and 3 of the top 10 players in the state. That's one of Virginia is one of those states that's talent rich, that doesn't get a whole lot of attention nationally, but puts out really, really quality players every single year. And Clemson has done some good things in that state as of late. So really excited for this pickup and it kind of gives you some momentum heading into a big weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't be better momentum heading into the Elite Junior Day on Saturday. Huge recruiting weekend that we'll get to in just a moment. But what a get for the Tigers. The new hires. Chris Rump already flexing his muscle on the recruiting trail and getting these elite defensive ends to shut it down early and commit to the Tigers. And that's something that we're going to need for this cycle and heading forward. And that's exactly why Dabo brought Matt Luke and Chris Rump along, because of their ability to recruit and bring players in, and it's having an early impact. Couldn't be more excited about landing this guy, man. And I'm sure Tony Elliott is not happy with the Tigers right now, just stealing all the talent in Virginia.
Probably not.
But I don't think they had much of a chance of landing him, regardless of whether he came to Clemson or decided to go elsewhere. So, John Sarah makes a good point. Before we move on to Elite Junior Day, Bentiker got a nice bump as well. I think he's ranked 90th nationally now. So
Yeah, he made
I
a
think,
jump into the top 100, and
yeah, I think he got like a 15 position bump or something like that. That spun, bumped him into the top 100. So good for him. All good news there. So um, all right, let's go ahead and shift gears, Jordan, to Elite Junior Day. We got a huge recruiting weekend coming up this Saturday and Clemson, South Carolina. We got a star-studded roster of individuals coming in, namely on the offensive line. I mentioned Matt Luke just a second ago about the reason that he was brought into Clemson was to develop the guys that are already on the roster, but he was also brought into Clemson to recruit and bring in elite offensive line talent. And he's got a lot. He's got a roster of dudes coming in this Saturday that Clemson fans should be getting very excited about. We also got a couple defensive line guys, a couple edge guys coming in that we're pretty excited about as well. I'm not going to go over the all encompassing list of individuals going. We'll just go through and highlight a few. Bigger names that are going to be on campus, guys that we think Clemson has a pretty good shot with, and guys that we think could be a big deal in the 2025 class. So, starting off with defensive tackle Isaiah Campbell out of Durham, North Carolina. He's going to be a big one that's coming in. On the offensive line, Jalen Beckley's coming in. Um, he's from Addison, Texas, and Trinity Christian. David Sanders out of Charlotte, North Carolina, probably the biggest fish that Clemson's going after in the
oh yeah,
2025 class. We'll see what kind of shot we have with him. He's from your neck of the woods up there in Charlotte, North
yes,
Carolina.
he is Providence Day.
So put in a good word for us.
I'll try. I know a couple of people up there, but
yeah,
we'll see.
absolutely. You got Mason Short, former Alabama commit out of Evans, Georgia, that will be on campus this Saturday. There's a couple more that we'll get into, but what are the highlights you think of the guys coming in to Saturday for Elite Junior Day? Do you think there's a shot for any of these guys to shut it down? I know one that we were hoping that might shut it down already has, and Ari Watford. So don't got to worry about him shutting it down. He will be on campus, but he's already a hard commit to the Tigers. Maybe he can sway a few others to follow suit and do the same thing and shut it down early before summer even rolls around.
Yeah, I mean, with this staff, nothing would surprise me at this point. I mean, I think you're already starting to see the early returns of the new hires and Matt Luke and Chris Rump. Obviously, Chris Rump getting his first big fish already, even before we've gotten all our kids on campus. That's a really big deal. So I think there's a few guys. I think defensive lineman Isaiah Campbell is a guy that really jumps out to me. I feel like Clemson is in a really good spot with him. Would not, I don't like to project these types of things too much, but I feel really good about where they stand, and Clemson is going to try to lock him in. They view him as one of the top 2 or 3 guys on the board overall.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of talent they think he is, and the kind of player they want in this class. So Isaiah Campbell, first and foremost, is a guy that I look at that I think Clemson is really, really close with, and I would not surprise me if he decided to pull the trigger sooner rather than later. And I think what jumps out to me is obviously the offensive line haul. Right, I don't want to say haul because you haven't landed them. But the guys you're bringing in, I mean, the fact that I think the Matt Luke effect is already, starting to show. I think Clemson is, and I think this is something that's going to continue. I think you're starting to see them get in it more with some of these big time recruits, and I think, from a David Sanders perspective, I know that the Matt Luke hire has made a huge impact on his recruitment, and when that first sit down went really, really well. Talked to him for about an hour and a half, I think, last weekend. Or the weekend before last weekend, and they really hit it off, and that's really good. And I think I think David Sanders' recruitment is one that Clemson has some catching up to do, And I think the beginnings of that started last weekend, and that was a big deal. And I think Clemson will be a factor in his recruitment moving forward. So we'll see how that goes. And obviously, some of the other guys, Mason Short, obviously recently decommitted from Alabama.
Yep.
Alabama, and as a guy that I think Clemson has a shot on. I think Georgia's the perceived leader right now, but I think this weekend is a good opportunity to really sell him and kind of put that first pitch going forward. And obviously, Matt Luke is a guy. He's going to be recruiting against his former school. He knows kind of how they operate,
Mm-hmm.
and he has an opportunity to. It'll be his first chance to really go after a guy that Georgia also wants. So that's going to be interesting to see as well. But this offensive line group in general, I mean, we talk about it. Chauncey Gooden from Tennessee is a guy that they're really high on as well. Braden Jacobs from Buford. Obviously that area of Georgia has been really good to Clemson in the past. We'll always pound the drum to get these Metro Atlanta kids. And that's a big deal. So really excited to see how that plays out. Jalen Beckley is a fast riser. You mentioned him from Trinity Christian Academy. You see Clemson continuing to kind of go into Texas and see what they could get, especially in the trenches. I think that's always been a talent-rich state. This visitor list is really, really exciting, and I think you have a really good opportunity overall to get some guys. But I think the offensive line is the first thing that really jumps off the page to me, and then I think you have some really talented defensive line prospects. And I also wanted to shout out Brett Clatterball from Virginia, another big-time recruit in that state. Clemson, like I said, Clemson is continuing to do work in the state of Virginia. And there's going to be some stiff competition. I know Notre Dame is really hard after him as well. But you've won some recruiting battles against them in the past. You've lost some. But I think that's going to be competitive because obviously both schools continue to field really good defenses, and Wesco I think has proven to be pretty quality and solid recruiter. And I think this is going to be another opportunity to get a big recruiting win in his hat. But I think Brett Clatterball is a guy that they really like as well. So again, star-studded cast. Didn't even mention 5-star defensive end Elijah Griffin. I didn't even.
Yeah.
I don't think I mentioned Bryce Davis from Grimsley as well. I mean, this is a really, really good group of guys, and there might be a couple of more depending on what's confirmed or not.
Right.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Look, you look over the list and you just laid it out pretty well. But you look over this list of guys, and there's a lot to be excited about. Jay put it really nicely. Hold on, He said Chris Rump got it started. Now it's Matt Luke's time to cook. I absolutely agree, man.
Sure.
Couldn't agree more. And he's got a ton of talent coming in this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a commit come out of this weekend for the offensive line. There's a lot of momentum for this 2025 class for Clemson right now. It would be really nice to see Clemson get a big-time OL commit early in this class because, as you guys saw last class, it took us up until July until we had our first recruit. And then we didn't have any after that until the last, diminishing hours of this before early signing day when we added a couple more after we didn't get the guys that we were trying to in the transfer portal. So, I'd really love to see specifically on the offensive line us get a big-time talent early just to kind of get that rolling for this 2025 class because they're going to take, quite a few offensive linemen in this class. And I just think it'd be really important to get kind of one early that you can kind of hang your hat on and then, carry the momentum for the rest of the class. So ton to be excited about. Hopefully we have some great news coming to next week's show, next Thursday at 7 p.m. Be here. Me and Jordan will be here. Hopefully we have some really good news coming out of the Elite Junior Day for Clemson, and we'll keep you guys posted as best we can as the information comes. check out the community tab, and we'll post things there as well, just to kind of keep you guys abreast of all the situations that are going on there. But I think it's right now the 2025 class ranks fifth overall. We got 8 commits. I don't think it could have started very much better than it has. You mentioned it. You see the impacts of the new coaching staff already, and Chris Rump and Matt Luke, just the excitement that it feels like, and the guys that are coming and giving Clemson a much more serious look than maybe they would have had there not been changes along the Clemson coaching staff.
Yeah, and at 2 positions, I think you arguably needed the most juice as far as recruiting. Obviously, defensive end is a group that hasn't been poor for Clemson by any means, but just hasn't been up to the level that Clemson teams of old had, and obviously the offensive line has been a continuous cycle of, okay, let's hope we field a good one this year.
Yeah.
But now I think you have 2 proven guys at multiple stops. Chris Rump's case, at both levels, that have a history of recruiting high-level talent. Obviously, Chris Rump is in his second stint at Clemson as well, so we know how good of an evaluator and some of the guys he brought in. And so you have not only good recruiters, but you have good evaluators of talent and good developers of talent. We saw what those 2 guys have produced over their careers. So it's exciting, and this junior day is going to be an opportunity to for Clemson to swing their big stick on the recruiting trail, because I think as much as people want to write off Clemson, and as far as in the national landscape, in the eyes of recruits, this is still one of the best programs in America, and they still hold a ton of weight and a ton of power, especially when they get kids on campus. It's really tough to get. Clemson's a really tough team to beat out, and I think you're starting to see that Dabo is if there's anything, if there's one thing you can't knock Dabo for, it's his recruiting acumen. That the guy knows what he's doing, and he's always. I'm never going to question Clemson's ability to get guys out of the high school ranks. He's going to make whatever adjustments are needed, whatever changes are needed, as far as keeping that part of the program going. So, just really excited for this weekend and the returns, because I feel good about a lot of these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the big things is the hires I think that Dabo made, specifically in Chris Rump, right? Like, he's in my opinion, he's in a very unique situation, because he's made it very clear that he came back to Clemson to stay. He wanted to retire on the lake at Clemson. He's been looking for this opportunity. Once he kind of made up his mind that he was kind of done with the NFL, in his, in the little bit of time that he's had to talk to the media, he's made it very clear that he and his family wanted to come back to Clemson, South Carolina, kind of retire on the lake. And, so I think he's in a very unique situation where he can recruit these guys. There's no question on whether he's going to be at Clemson long-term or not. And that really does help you on the recruiting cycle. When you're constantly, your name's being involved in, different things, going to this place or going to that place, sometimes that does hurt you along the recruiting trail. And that won't be the case for a guy in Chris Rump. He's going to be there, I think, for a long time to come, probably as long as he wants to be there. And not that our, as you mentioned, not that our imposition has been terrible, but it's certainly taken a step back. So, and I think we couldn't have hired a better guy to get it back to the elite level that it was at before. And then, you flip the page and look at a guy like Matt Luke. I mean, his resume speaks for itself. Look at all the guys he's put into the NFL. Look at the elite offensive line groups he's put together. Finally, we have a guy at the helm of the Clemson offensive line that I think can truly make it an elite destination for offensive linemen, which is something that Clemson's program has been missing for a very long time. So,
very long time.
Couldn't be more excited about what's happening along the recruiting trail and the recent hires that Dabo Swinney has made. I think he's hit it out of the park with Garrett Riley, Matt Luke, and Chris Rump. I don't think he could have made any better hires in those positions. And it just feels like there's kind of a turning of momentum at Clemson. There feels like there's kind of a new energy around the program with some of these new coaching hires. So, hopefully we see that continue to progress in spring, and because, I think this is a perfect transition to start talking about the Clemson schedule that we have coming up. So I mentioned earlier in the show that we'd be talking about the 2024 Clemson schedule, and man, do we have quite a schedule! And it's a pretty unique schedule. There's 2 bye weeks in the schedule now, with the addition of Cal, Sanford, and SMU. They had to kind of redo the entire schedule. So we're not going to give any predictions or anything like that, but we are going to go through the schedule, give general thoughts about the layout of it, how it kind of looks for Clemson, and how we think it'll kind of play out. Not necessarily a record prediction or anything like that, but just kind of just some conversations about Clemson's schedule. So give me a minute, guys, and I'm going to try to pull up Clemson's schedule so we can all look at it together, and kind of analyze what we got going on here.
While we're waiting, Go Tiger says Campbell would be a great get also. Absolutely. And we're making up a lot of ground with Mason Short. Yeah. And I think with Isaiah Campbell, I think, Clemson's in a really, really good spot right now. So really excited to see, what the returns are from this weekend. And Mason Short, I think you're going to have, I think Clemson is, has increasingly, made up ground in that recruitment, and Matt Luke has done a really good job with him. So we'll see. I think I would still lean towards Georgia right now, but I think anything can happen. And when you get guys on campus, this wouldn't be the first guy that Georgia was the perceived leader for a kid that Clemson also wanted, and then things change when you get them on campus. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's see what else you guys are talking about. K Klubnik enthusiast asks, anyone know when David Sanders will commit? Not anytime, not too soon. I know he plans to. I think he wants to finish his recruitment sometime in the summer, but right now he's kind of taking it slow, and I don't think he's in a huge rush to tie things up. Things can change, and there have been guys that have expressed that in the past, that Clemson has got on campus, and then boom, things change and their timeline flips. But that's going to be that's the number one guy in the class by most accounts. So there are a lot of schools after him, and there are a lot of people in his ear. I know that for certain. So he's going to be wanting to. It's going to be a battle still. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. He's not in a rush right now. That's all I know. Jay asked, those 110 Society posts were strategic, so hopefully it worked. Yeah, that there certainly was a the timing was certainly pretty. It was pretty noticeable. So I thought that was a big deal, seeing all those Clemson players announcing deals and signings with the 110 Society. That's a big deal. And I think because Clemson is never going to outright lead with as far as their NIL and as far as recruiting goes, or the transfer portal for that matter. But so they're going to find ways to kind of work around that and let the recruits know that, hey, NIL is going to be NIL is going to be a factor when you're here, but we're not going to that's not what we're trying to sell you on. But so it's a good way to do it. Let's see. Okay, well, we have the schedule up, so.
All right, yeah, let's go ahead and get into the schedule a little bit. Again, a pretty unique schedule, I guess. Going to take probably some getting used to with the 2 open dates. One is extremely early in the season. The other one a little bit better placed in the schedule, but I think it lines up overall. I think the schedule lines up pretty well for Clemson. Obviously, everybody knows we got a huge week 1 neutral site game coming with Georgia in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. Obviously, this has not been a series that has been particularly kind to Clemson historically. We've had some good runs against Georgia, but never really consistent success against them. They've obviously won 7 out of the last 8. You guys see the series record up there. Georgia last season was 13-1. The only game they lost was the SEC championship game to the Alabama. And that was really just kind of a game that didn't particularly go well for them. It was kind of just one of those games that they just obviously played pretty well, but didn't get the job done. But heading into next season, Georgia's probably going to be the number 1 team in the country. They got a ton of talent coming back. They recruit out of this world every single year. Kirby Smart's just got that thing churning every single year. They obviously do the transfer portal really well when they pick their pieces that they get. So tough way to start the season for 2024. But week 1, head down to Atlanta, Georgia, and take on the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah. It's obviously that's the biggest, toughest game on the schedule. But it will be a good measuring stick, and I think obviously with the 12-team playoff, I think there's a lot more incentive.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it depends on how you look at it, but I think there's reasons to have incentive to schedule tougher non-conference games if you feel like you have you'll have the record to make up for it. I mean, because all you have to do is obviously it's 12 instead of 4 now, so the margin for error is obviously a little bit different. But yeah, this is a tough matchup. I think Georgia is an 11.5 favorite as it stands right now, which is probably fair. I mean, 2 out of the last 3 national championships. They have a lot of guys coming back from last season. They only lost 1 game this past season by a field goal, and it probably should have been. I don't want to say should have been a playoff team because I think they were rightfully left out, but I think they were one of the 4 best teams in America, if we're being honest. So,
right.
Going to be a tough matchup, but a good measuring stick. And obviously, it's going to be, you go head to head for Georgia for a lot of guys. Just throughout history, Clemson has gone head to head with Georgia for a lot of guys. So there's a lot of opportunity here. But it's going to be a tough one to win. I mean, can't sugarcoat it. So we'll see how that one goes.
Yeah, like I said, tough way to start the season. Obviously, Clemson's not going to be favored in that game. I think the early line's already out, and they're somewhere around a 12-point underdog already. We'll see where that ends up as we get closer and spring happens and summer, and you got a better idea of the rosters and things like that. But again, we'll hash all that out in the summertime and as we get closer to fall camp and stuff like that, doing an actual schedule breakdown and predicting wins and losses and stuff like that. But moving right along through the schedule. Before I get into it, though, let me give a shout out to Ryan Cantor. I got this graphic from him. He used this in one of his YouTube videos, and he did an article on Shaking the Southland, talking about the Clemson schedule release and stuff like that. So I do want to give him credit for making this graphic. If you guys don't know who he is, just type in Ryan Cantor in the YouTube search section, and he'll pop up. He's got a great channel over there, great insight on Clemson. He's a writer, and he contributes to, I think, several different outlets, TigerNet, Shaking the Southland. He does a ton of stuff. So shout out to him. Great graphic he produced here. So moving right along, after the big-time Georgia game, we roll into App State. Not a slouch team by any means, but again, Clemson should not have much issues with them. They're 0-5 versus Clemson. They are a team that tends to give Power 5 teams all that they want. Specifically, North Carolina comes to mind. It seems like every time North Carolina plays App State, they have some sort of trouble. But we head into Georgia, then App State, and then we're an open date. So first 3 weeks of the season, bang, 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 we're already into an open date, which is pretty crazy. What's your thoughts on that open date being so early in the 2024 season, Jordan?
It's interesting, and it's obviously it's going to be something that's going to take some getting used to. But honestly, it gives you some opportunity. I mean, Georgia and App State is a pretty quality opener. I mean, you open obviously with a top 3 team in the country, probably
Yep.
preseason, probably the number one team heading into next year. And then you followed up with a quality G5 program in App State that has upset some Power 5 teams, and obviously gives they play a lot of games against the ACC, and so that's going to be that's not a slouch as far as group of five opponents go. So I mean, you have two really good opportunities, to get to kind of tune up. I don't want Georgia is not a tune up game. That's more of a measuring stick game. But you have a measuring stick game, and then you have a tune up game after that against another quality team, and then that open date I think allows you to kind of evaluate where you are before you head into your conference stretch. And we'll talk about that because I think this next group of games is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. This next group of games is super interesting, in my opinion, Jordan. One interesting fact, I think, is that Clemson doesn't particularly play well coming out of bye weeks. This is just something that I remember, I think it was last season, me and you went back and looked at this and Clemson's performance in games coming off of bye weeks. And they do not seem to play super well heading out of a bye week. And you're playing a North Carolina State team that was 9-4 last year. They obviously are going to be a tough out. Now Clemson gets that as a home game. That's going to be in Death Valley, so that's in your favor there. Obviously, then you get the new blood to the ACC in Stanford coming to Death Valley. And then you go on a run that is Florida State, Wake Forest, and Virginia. Florida State, obviously, that's going to be one of probably your second biggest opponent of the year. Just thinking about preseason rankings and the fact that they won the ACC last season, Florida State's going to be a huge game. Again, we got to go down to Florida State. Their quarterback is none other than DJ Uiagalelei. I'm sure all Clemson fans remember exactly who that was. So he's transferred from Oregon State, and now he's at Florida State. We'll see how well he does there. But a lot of interesting storylines and matchups there in that second kind of run of Clemson's schedule in 2024. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the toughest stretch of your schedule, obviously. And I think that open date gives you a chance to kind of get ready for it. It's nice that you I think the ACC did a little bit of a balancing act because Clemson has seven home games and only 4 true road games. So they were like, well, we're going to put your road games on back-to-back weeks twice. And so one of those is at Florida State and at Wake Forest, and obviously the stretch, and then obviously Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh later. But I think this 6-game stretch or 5-game stretch, excuse me, I think this is probably the toughest part of your schedule, but I think it's manageable. I think really that the NC State and Florida State games obviously jump off the page. NC State beat you. I mean, both those teams beat you last year, and I think you have an opportunity to get back. Especially, me personally, I do not like losing to NC State, so I am very much looking forward to that game. So, but NC State has done some good work in the portal, and obviously they continue to be really good defensively. So that's not going to be easy even at home. And so, and I think Stanford is, while they're not very good, I think it's going to be weird to kind of have them, come to Death Valley. That's going to be strange. We've only played them one other time in history, as the notes say, the '86 Gator Bowl.
Yep.
So been a while. We don't typically play a ton of Western teams. So. And now they're a conference opponent, so that's going to be different. And then obviously at Florida State is, I think I would say is arguably, while it's the second toughest game on the schedule, I think it's the biggest game on the schedule for obvious reasons. I think defending ACC champions, you're trying to kind of reassert yourselves within the league after last season. So a lot of things, and obviously playing against DJ Uyunglele adds an extra intrigue to that game. So that's the toughest part of your stretch. I think at Wake and at home against Virginia, Tony Elliott coming to town. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, Tony Elliott's return to Death Valley, man. That's going to be crazy.
Yeah, that'll be cool. But obviously you have a lot of success. I mean, neither of those schools are in particularly good shape, roster wise right now. I think you should. I mean, those are games you should expect to win. Obviously, the Wake Forest game last year was a very forgettable performance, but I mean, if you made the improvements you hope to have made offensively, I think you should be okay. So, but yeah, I think that's the toughest part of your schedule.
Definitely by far the toughest stretch of the schedule. I think it's interesting that you mentioned that Florida State's probably the most important game of the season. No doubt about that, just based off conference and, just Florida State and Clemson kind of jockeying for the ACC. Traditionally, that's how it's kind of been. But if you look at the schedule, it does kind of set up nicely. And if you lose to Georgia, which I'm pretty much sure everyone in America is going to pick Clemson to lose to Georgia. No one's going to blink if you lose to Georgia. Like I said, they're probably going to be the number one team heading into the season. Everyone's going to expect you to lose to Georgia. Really what you want to see out of that game is being competitive, right? You don't want to go out there and get blown off the field, right? Yeah. You want a tight, competitive game, and hopefully you can
definitely not 63-3.
Yeah, hopefully you can pull it out in the end and not look like Florida State did, right? Hopefully it's a little bit better than the 10-3 as far as offensively when it comes to playing Georgia this season. But, we'll see. But, again, you look at the schedule. You got Georgia followed up by a lesser team, although no disrespect to App State. They obviously come out to play specifically when they play Power 5 teams, and they do upset Power 5 teams quite often. But, a lesser opponent there. And then you roll into your open date. North Carolina State, a little bit of a tougher matchup, but then you got Stanford, right, who's not really in a good position right now, right? So a little bit of a softer or not softer game, but an easier game, right, when you're looking at the grand scheme of things. Then you roll into Florida State and then followed up by two, much easier games than that Florida State game and Wake Forest and Virginia. So I think it sets up nicely for the Tigers. There will probably be a ton of talk in heading into the Florida State game with DJ Uyunglele and Cade Klubnik, and I'm sure the media is going to run wild with that storyline. It's probably going to be pretty fun to listen to. You mentioned Stanford coming to Death Valley. That is super weird. That might be the weirdest thing about the schedule is just seeing that logo and knowing that they're coming to Death Valley. Kind of weird there. And then one of the more interesting ones, I think, or the more fun ones, in my opinion, will be Tony Elliott's return to Death Valley. I don't think he'll get too much hate there. I'm sure he'll be welcomed back, pretty well for the most part. But, again, then you head into an open date. Again, the second open date of the season. And then you come in with Louisville, right? So they're coming off a really good season. They were 10-4, went to the ACC championship game, could not get it done against Florida State. But Clemson plays pretty well against them, right? And then you got Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech probably could be one of the better teams, I think, in the ACC this coming year. Pittsburgh obviously had a rough season. They're really not looking well, even heading into 2024. The Citadel, I mean, look at that record. They're a terrible team. Should be a very easy.
Shout out to El Cid, though. We still love them, but yeah,
love the Citadel.
They were
still
not very
love
good.
the Citadel. I grew up going to pretty much every single one of their football and basketball games because I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. So I got a special place in my heart for the Citadel, but they're not a good football team. No. It's going to be an easy win for the Tigers. It's going to be a huge blowout. Getting ready for South Carolina to return to Death Valley and us to get a little bit of revenge in our stadium from 2 seasons ago when they ended a whole bunch of streaks in Death Valley. So that's a little bit easier of a stretch. I think obviously that second portion of the schedule up there is obviously the tougher part, but if you're looking pretty good coming out of that 5-game stretch in the middle there, I think this last little stretch of 5 games is going to be pretty it sets up pretty favorable if you're Clemson.
Yeah. I think this back half I think is pretty manageable. I mean, Louisville at Virginia Tech at Pittsburgh is a pretty. It's not an. I wouldn't say it's an easy stretch, especially since Louisville is ACC runner up this past season, and Virginia Tech seems to be on the rise under Brett Pry. They had a really strong close to the year.
Right.
But I think that's pretty manageable. Just have the back-to-back road games is probably the thing that makes you a little that makes things the most difficult. And obviously Pitt has had some relative success against Clemson since they've been in the league, as the note says. 2-2 against Clemson since joining the ACC. Obviously, the one that always jumps out is that 2016 loss. That one I'll never forget. One of the just it hurts less knowing what happened after, but
it does. But it was a brutal loss, man.
Yeah,
like that.
Just the way it played out. You had that game won, and your best player throws an unfortunate interception, and obviously a kicker named Blewett beats you at the end. So it was a pretty brutal way. And then obviously beat you in 2021. Obviously that season was pretty rough by all accounts. But they won the ACC that season, so not an embarrassing loss. And then obviously the 2 times you beat them were in the ACC championship and the COVID year, right? Yeah.
Yep.
I think so. So it's been a pretty competitive series. Well, competitive. Clemson's wins haven't been particularly competitive, but Pitt has won some pretty. They've won some competitive games as well. So, hey, they're coming off of a rough season, but I think that's going to be. I think they're going to be better. It's Pat Narduzzi is never going to stay down for long, and I think he's done a good job there. So, there's a lot of intrigue, and then we talked about the Citadel, and obviously we don't really need to emphasize the importance of the South Carolina game. We all know how big of a deal it is. So that's I think that's a pretty, but I think overall it's a pretty manageable schedule, and you get you get some time to you get a tune-up game right before that South Carolina game. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, like I said, overall, like just glancing at Clemson's schedule, not deep diving too much into it, it sets up for Clemson as a pretty favorable schedule. All your toughest games are followed by relatively manageable games. Your bye weeks are, I think the first one in week 3 is kind of weird, but it is what it is. You get 2 bye weeks, so does it really matter where they are now that you get 2 bye weeks? Probably not in the grand scheme of things. But outside of that, I mean, I think it shapes up about as favorably as it could be. Shout out to the ACC for the nod on a couple of those games. And Clemson, like you mentioned, only play 4 true road games this season. So that's pretty crazy when you think about it. So, overall, I think Clemson will be an improved team in 2024. But again, we got to see what happens in spring and how these players start developing and how the offensive line is going to look and all this kind of stuff. So still tons of work to do if you're Clemson, but the schedule looks nice. I'm glad it's finally released. I'm so glad Clemson doesn't have to travel to the West Coast and go play Stanford or Cal over there. Thank God we don't have to do that. I think we don't do that until 2026. Somewhere in there.
Do we play at Cal in 26?
I think it's at Cal in 26. So that's the first trip to the West Coast for Clemson. But who knows? Maybe we're not in the ACC then. I wouldn't. I don't know.
Who knows?
I'm not predicting anything, but it wouldn't surprise me if we're not. But I think it also wouldn't surprise me if we are in the ACC. still by then. So
Will says, I want to go to a game at Cal to eat the garlic fries. Yeah, I've heard good things. Tony Altamore, who does great stuff for the USC channel and for the main channel. Yeah, he raves about those garlic fries. So
I don't know, Will. That's a long trip for some garlic fries, man.
yeah,
There's got to be somebody on the East Coast that makes equally as good garlic fries.
I applied to Cal out of high school, so that would be so who knows, that might be something I end up doing anyway. Just go for the garlic fries, maybe not for the game day atmosphere or anything, but I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can swing that. We'll go over there and get some garlic fries and watch Clemson beat up on Cal, hopefully. But that kind of does it for the planned portion of our show, guys. I think what we're going to do now is we're going to turn it over to you guys, the comment section. You guys know every show, me and Jordan, once we're done covering what we want to cover, we kind of turn it over to you guys. Get into the comment section, get your questions in about Clemson football, college football, whatever you want to ask us, whatever you want to talk to us about or hear us talk about. Go ahead and put it in the chat section now. We'll give you guys a couple minutes to get that in there, and we'll see what you guys want to end the show with tonight. But we got 45 people in the live chat right now. If you guys could go ahead, hit that like button while you're in here for us. It only takes a second, and it helps us out a ton. We appreciate you guys being in here, supporting the channel just by showing up and watching. And getting into the comment section and interacting with us. Really do appreciate it. There wouldn't be a show without you guys. So thank you so much. And let's get to the chat section.
All right. Let's see what you guys are talking about. John Sarian asks, odds Luke gets Pennington to flip a switch and be a significant contributor. When it's hard to put odds on it. But if there's any guy I want to flip that switch, it is Dietrich Pennington. I think he's a guy that has had, when he came in, he obviously had some physical things to work on, but also I think he had to mature. So you're just kind of waiting to see whether that maturation will start to show, and whether it'll maybe under new coaching, it's a different response. With Matt Luke, from what I've been told, he's a guy that's not as he's a teacher, but he also emphasizes, just attitude and playing with a mean streak and attacking and attacking as an offensive lineman. Playing with perfect technique is great, but it doesn't matter if you don't have any sort of aggression. You have to have a mindset. And I think with some of Clemson's offensive line struggles, it hasn't necessarily always been guys playing with poor technique. I think it's been guys just flat out not having, I don't know the right word for it, but having that kind of mentality to attack the man in front of you and move them off the ball and off the line of scrimmage. I feel like if Clemson approached every play, if their offensive line approached that, plays like that every single snap, I think things would have been a lot different this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that dog mentality, right? Yeah. It's kind of like that nastiness, that ruthlessness as an offensive lineman. Like at the end of the day, that's a very physical position.
Yep.
And take scheme and all that stuff out of it. At the end of the day, as an offensive lineman, it's about beating the man across from you consistently. That's what it's really about. When you strip it all down and all that stuff, it's really about aggressiveness and beating the guy in front of you. And, to your point, that's been something that I think some Clemson offensive linemen have struggled with. And I think that's an area where Matt Luke is going to demand that of his offensive linemen. He's going to demand that those guys go out there with that dog mentality, that attitude, that physical toughness, and attack the defensive lineman.
It's definitely a mentality thing, and I think Matt Luke could be a guy that gets that out of him, because I haven't given up on Dietrich Pennington. I think I liked him a lot as a recruit, and think he's a guy that if a switch does flip, I mean that even if he's not a starter, he provides really really good depth for you on the interior. So um, we'll see. Jay asked a nice question. Who will be the best quarterback Clemson will face on this schedule? Actually, I think this answer is pretty easy. I think Carson Beck
Carson Beck
at Georgia, first game of the year, and I think that's a good thing. Honestly,
Yeah.
I don't think you face a quarterback quite to that level. The
Mhm.
rest of your schedule. I mean, I think Grayson McCall could be interesting at NC State. He's a guy that's had a productive college career, but I don't think he's this. He's from my neck of the woods. And I watched him play. I mean, I think he's a smart football player, but he doesn't blow me away. And I think there could be an adjustment period playing at the ACC level.
Mhm.
So obviously, do you play DJ at Florida State? I think he'll be one of the better quarterbacks you face. But there's not a ton of great quarterbacks I think on this schedule, and I think that's a good thing because I think last year you played a lot of really good ones.
A lot of good
Yeah.
quarterbacks.
It's kind of a different. It's kind of a nice change of pace, and I think for defense, that who knows? I think this defense is still going to be really good, but there are a couple question marks here.
Yeah.
That's a good thing that you're not facing an elite signal caller outside of maybe your first opponent. So
Yeah, I mean the rest of them are really just average to good
yeah,
quarterbacks the rest of the way,
yeah.
which
I think Kyron Drones has showed some flashes at Virginia Tech,
he might
but
be the next best one that you
yeah,
face if you were.
I think from a matchup standpoint, he presents a lot of challenges for your linebackers. Just the way they
Mhm.
use him in the run game and all of that. He's a tough guy. But beyond that, it's not really much. We don't know what we're going to get out of Lenore Sellers at South Carolina. He's a guy that could be up there if he pans out. I mean, I like him. I liked him as a recruit, but he'll be a first year starter.
Right.
And obviously they have their own question marks offensively this year. So yeah, I think the answer is easily Carson Beck.
Yeah, and regardless of who's the quarterback at South Carolina, they got a long way to go on that offensive line
Right.
before they can even worry about how good their quarterback is. Uh, because I mean, I don't feel bad for South Carolina at all, but
No.
my man got killed back there all season long. So you know they got a lot bigger issues than quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think Lenore Sellers, I would lean towards him ending up being a pretty good quarterback. But yeah, they've got a lot of issues, and he'll be a first year starter. And yeah, I don't love the weapons. They did some good work in the portal, but I don't think they have anybody that terrifies you outside of. I think Rocket Sanders is a good running back, but I think at wide receiver they made some decent additions, but nothing that truly scares you. And obviously the offensive line is an issue. So there's not like we said. I don't think there's a ton of great quarterbacks on this schedule, and that's a good thing. Let me see what else. What else were we talking about? I had one. I should. I need to start starring these questions so I can actually find
Yeah,
them when I need to. That's one thing StreamYard gives you, and I never do it. David Wood is asking about Heaven Brown Schuler. I don't know. You can clarify in the comments. What do you want to know about him? Like,
if you're asking about maybe his contribution early on, I don't know how much he's going to get onto the field early.
yeah,
Obviously, you look at Clemson's defensive tackle position, and they're pretty loaded. They got they got a ton of dudes there. They can play at a very high level. So I don't know that he's going to get a ton of opportunity early. Barring injury.
we'll see.
But
Yeah,
I think he'll develop into a really good player. I think he's going to be really good for Clemson. But if you're asking about early playing time, I'm just assuming that's what you're asking. I don't know. I don't think there'll be much opportunity for a lot of early playing time.
Yeah, I mean, because you got to think. I mean, obviously Peter Woods is your true, your bona fide, is going to start. And then you also
Yeah.
have Demonte Capehart, Peyton Page. You have Trey Williams coming back from injury. You have, and then you have the true freshmen from last season that are going. That'll be going. That are both coming off of injury, but are still ahead of Schuler and Vic Burley and Stephylan Green. Both guys that we're really, really high on and think are going to be really, really good football players that just obviously didn't get the chance to play a ton.
And I think both of them would have played a lot without injury.
I think so too. And then it's tough, man. There's not a deeper position group on the team than defensive tackle right now. So that's going to be the toughest part, for Heaven Brown Schuler as an early enrollee. But I think I'm still high on him, and I think he's going to end up being a really good football player. But the early, barring a ton of injuries, I don't see a huge, a great path to playing time for him right now. But we'll see.
Maybe we'll get a lot of blowouts and he can get some work in there.
Yeah, that would be nice.
It'd be real nice for a change.
Let's see. Isaac Smith says, got in late. Have y'all talked about the recruiting weekend? Yes, we did. We'll put a timestamp. If you don't want to go back now, we'll put we started putting timestamps at the end of these streams. So if you guys that are joining late or wanted to hear us talk about something, you can go back and do that. So we'll have those in shortly after this stream ends. So make sure to check that out. But yeah, man, I think this 25 class has a chance to be really, really special. I think they've done a really good job of getting out ahead of guys. And, 8 commits, before we've even, before we even hit February is
crazy,
really unusual for Clemson standards. So, that's exciting. And you got them, it's not just you're taking anybody. These are high caliber recruits and at positions, at premium positions. Obviously, you have your quarterback in the class. You have a running back in the class, a really, really good running back in the class. You have an edge rusher, an elite edge rusher in the class. You've gotten out ahead of offensive line. I think you have a couple of really, really nice receiver commits right now. Getting some burners, and then Marquise Henderson and Juju Preston. So I mean, you're in a really good spot right now. You have some really high caliber impact guys, and I think that's going to help you sell to the guys that you haven't had commit yet, and the guys you're going after. So, yeah, man, I'm really, really happy with how this staff has attacked this cycle and the early returns. So I'm excited to see what this weekend holds. Let's see. Jay asked a good question. He says, "Are y'all for or against Peter Woods at defensive end?" Yeah, that's something that's been thrown out there, and by Dabo himself at times. That's something that the staff is definitely considering. But I want to see how spring ball goes. I'm not against it right now. I think he's a guy that can play out there and play at a pretty high level because you're so good at defensive tackle. That's a move, and if you feel like you really need to, that you can do. And I think he's comfortable playing edge. He did it in high school. Played basically all along the defensive line in high school. He has that positional versatility because he's sort of a tweener as far as his body type is concerned. So,
yeah.
I'm not against it. I think his future is inside, but Christian Wilkins moved to defensive end in 2015 when Clemson needed him to because of injuries, and obviously that didn't damage his career or his projections, and still ended up a first-round pick. Peter Woods could do the same thing. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm not necessarily against it, but if I'm being honest, I prefer that he stay inside at
Me
defensive
too.
tackle.
Me
It's
too.
obviously his more natural position. He would be, I think, a very, very good defensive end, but he's going to be a better defensive tackle.
Yeah.
But again, looking at Clemson's roster, we just talked about how deep the defensive tackle room is, and we've made it clear how lean the defensive end position is, especially when it comes to proving guys on the field. So, unfortunately, it might be a move that Clemson has to make.
Yeah.
And we're lucky to have a guy in Peter Woods that can absolutely make that transition and probably play at a very high level at the defensive end position. So thank God we have him, and his versatility would allow us to do that. But I hope that he can stay inside and we can figure out a different solution for the defensive end position.
Right. Because, we still, there are options there at defensive end beyond doing that, but it just depends. Do those guys show that they're ready? You still have Cade Denhoff, who I thought had some flashes at the end of last year, and Zaire Patterson, a guy we're still waiting for the light bulb to come on.
Yep.
You have true freshman Darian Mayo coming in. Well, we'll see. I think he's a guy that potentially could do that. And I know that they've been repping Caden Story at defensive end at times during the season. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But I'm not, if the staff feels like that's the best option, I'm not going to be against it. But I definitely would prefer he stay inside and we develop the guys we already have at defensive end.
Yeah, I trust it if that's the decision they ultimately end up making. But I think it's a situation where you give Chris Rumpf the spring and really test those defensive ends that are on the roster. And if he thinks they're ready to roll, awesome. If not, then you bump Peter Woods outside and have him bump out there for the 2024 season and then see what happens after that. But I think you definitely take spring and rep those guys that you have and see if any of them are going to start taking that next step.
Yeah, and I completely forgot about Jaheim Lawson as well. So he's a guy that the staff really likes. They think he's one of the better pass rushers on the team, but obviously the run defense and the kind of the particulars of the position he still needs to get better at. But he's an option there as well. And so I don't think the defensive end room is devoid of guys that can play. But if they're not giving you what you want in spring, then I think it's something that has to be on the table for sure. But definitely would prefer he stay inside. Yeah, David says, "Yeah, I hope Vic Burley stays healthy." Yeah, he's a manimal.
That dude's gonna be so good, man. If he can stay healthy.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
It was just kind of unfortunate too. So I think he's gonna. Think he'll be in a really good spot this offseason, and we'll see kind of what he does in spring. But I think he's when he gets on the field, I think we'll be pretty happy with what we see. Stephylan Green as well. I'm a huge Stephylan Green guy. So we'll see. Jay says, "What's your biggest concern with playing UGA week 1?" Well, yeah, that's a good question. There are a lot when you're playing a team as good as Georgia. I mean, there's a lot of concerns.
My number one concern right now would be their defense against our offense.
Yeah, I think
particularly our offensive line and Cade Klubnik. Yeah. I think they're a really good team, obviously, but specifically their defense is always one of the best defenses in the country year in and year out. We know what Kirby Smart can do on the defensive side of the ball. That's kind of his bread and butter over there. So it could be a really tough start to the 2024 campaign for a Clemson offense. or it could be a momentum builder for the Clemson offense, right? But initially, if I had to pick one thing, that would be my biggest concern is it not going very well for the Clemson offense. And hopefully that doesn't bleed into games following that, but it's something that I could see, Cade maybe getting rocked or, some confidence getting shaken in that first game. And, you know, hopefully that doesn't happen, but that would be my biggest concern heading into the Georgia game.
Yeah. And, I will say this about Georgia's defense. This is probably their least impressive defensive line that they've had in a while. And that's very subjective. And that's a very relative statement.
Yeah.
Because I think they're not as strong on the defensive line for Georgia standards as they've been in the years before. Still really good. Those players are still really good, NFL draft picks. So don't get me wrong. But when I watched them last year, I didn't think they were as particularly dominant, and especially in pass rush situations as they had been the 2 years before. They have some really good. They have a lot of size, but I don't think the explosiveness and pass rush ability is quite there. Felt like they had to get more from the second level than they had in years past. So, assuming they don't have assuming they don't have like some freaks again, I think they're going to be a little more ordinary from a defensive line standpoint. I think the strength of their defense, honestly, is their defensive backs. I think they have they're going to have one of the best secondaries in college football. And, that's without getting Caleb Downs out of the transfer portal. So, that's what really, I think that's the group that is really going to be really strong for them this year. But, with Clemson's offensive line situation, Georgia's defensive line is still going to be a load issue. So,
yeah.
I don't think it'll be as glaring of a mismatch as it was in 2021 when they had all those, Jordan Davis, Devontae White,
right,
abusing Nolan Smith, like absolutely abusing your offensive line. Like I don't think I would be surprised if Clemson gave up like 7-8 sacks like they did in that 21 game.
Yeah, I hope not. And if they do, like, I don't know that I feel super comfortable with Cade under that much duress,
right?
Making great decisions. Again, hopefully he takes this offseason, he progresses in the ways that this team needs him to do. But, right now in that situation, that wouldn't give me, warm and fuzzies thinking about that situation.
Yeah, it would. And that's what their defense is still going to be really, really good, and it's going to be tough for Clemson to score on them. But I think you're in a better position. It's not as glaring of a mismatch because I think they're not going to win up front as badly as they did the last time you played them.
Right.
So it's really just about, and I think your receivers are better than they were in 2021. And I think you have a legit. I mean, you're better at tight end. So I think, Cade in this situation, I think his legs could be, if he makes that progression, I think it could be a factor in this game as well. But we'll see. We're not making predictions about this game right now, and obviously we're a long way away from it. But I don't feel poorly. I don't feel like terrible about the matchup. Like I don't go into this, man, Clemson has no chance.
Right.
So I think that's a good thing, but it's going to be tough, and it's going to be a measuring stick. It's not a game you expect to win right now, but
right.
I think you're not. I don't think it's as glaring of a mismatch as maybe people think.
Yeah, I think you should expect to be competitive.
Yeah. But we'll see. I've been very wrong about these openers in the past. We saw how the
Duke game. Let's please not start out like that again.
Yeah,
man.
No, thank you.
Please no. Don't do me and Jordan like that 2 years in a row.
Yeah,
I don't know if we can do it.
And And I mean, we talked a ton about their defense, but I think offensively they're going to be really good, and that's going to be a tough matchup because Carson Beck is a good quarterback and that decided to come back for another year,
Yep.
and they did some good work in the portal. And obviously, you're going to be playing, Trevor Etienne and uh, Branson Robinson and uh, what's the other? What's they have like a million 5-star running backs. I can't keep track of them all.
Yeah.
Um,
Just roll them out.
yeah, and it's good you don't have to face Brock Bowers this time around because he did some
Thank
damage
God.
in that
Yeah.
2021 game as a true freshman. Um, but they recruit really well at tight end. I think Oscar Delpa's still there. So that'll be still going to be a tough matchup. And so offensively, honestly, with maybe some of the depth concerns at defensive end and linebacker, I think that honestly scares me a little bit, a little bit more too. So, but
Yeah.
we'll see. Okay. K Club Nick Enthusiast says, imagine the statement if we get it. Yeah, I mean
Okay.
that's
That'd
that's the good thing about playing these types of games. You put yourself on the map
be.
if you get a win here. Obviously, it's a statement win for a lot of reasons. Georgia is the top program in the sport now, and from a recruiting standpoint, a win would be a big deal. Your place in the obviously you don't have a whole lot of historical success against Georgia, so it would be nice to get a win. And yeah, I mean it just sets the tone for the rest of the year, and obviously your perception of the team and how the season plays out changes dramatically if you get a win there. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Isaac asks, what incoming freshman do you think will make the biggest impact this year? Oh, that's a good one. There are a couple of answers here, but I think I'm going to go TJ Moore or I think you have to play Sammy Brown, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Oh,
I think
guaranteed. Yeah. No.
so.
He's
I could
he's
see
100% going to have some sort of role
Yeah.
in that defense. What it looks like, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But he will have, I think, a significant role in that defense.
And honestly, from what I've seen of Christian Beneker, as good as as good as this tight end room is, I mean, I could see him working his way onto the field in some
right.
capacity. And John Sarian asked how will our kicking look, and that kind of, I think Nolan Hooser could be like that
Nolan
too.
Hooser, that could be the guy.
Yeah.
That kind of comes in and really saves Clemson's kicking situation. You think about a guy in Robert Gunn, big time kicker we brought in last year, monster leg. He can kick it, to space, but the accuracy and the consistency didn't get there at any point in time last season. So I think a guy, like Nolan Hoosier, I think he could obviously come in and grab that starting kicking spot. I think that's definitely a possibility. I hope one of them, kind of separate themselves as a consistent field goal kicker because it affected Clemson not having that solid kicking game last
Yep.
year. It certainly affected how we were able to play in several games last season. So that's definitely a point where has to improve, and that's obviously a freshman that could be a huge impact because if he comes in and he's consistent, man, that's a huge void that is filled in that Clemson roster.
Absolutely.
But I think TJ Moore is the obvious answer there.
I think TJ just he looks the part right now of a starter, to be honest. But obviously he has to come in, and obviously he'll be a summer enrollee. But obviously back-to-back years we've seen summer enrollees with far less pedigree than TJ did, from a recruiting ranking standpoint, come in and
Be the
be, be
the
instant
most
impact guys.
be the most productive wide receivers on the roster.
Yep.
Both years. So
yeah, TJ can definitely be that. And one more guy I want to point out. I see David Wood talking about Ricardo Jones.
Yeah,
I think that's a sleeper one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Jeremiah
def
as well, co-signing. Yeah, Ricardo is good. But honestly, the guy I was thinking about was one more guy I was thinking about was Darian Mayo, because of the questions at defensive end.
Yeah.
I think he's the guy that has early. I think with his size, he's physically ready to play. I think Darian Mayo is a guy that comes in and works his way into the rotation at least right now. I think he's really, really good. So we'll see. Opposite of TJ Parker, you have a lot of question marks, and maybe he comes in and shows out early, because I think
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Clemson, you almost need a guy like that to come in and, maybe not necessarily be the starter, but be a high level contributor, in the rotation on that defensive end position. Because, outside of TJ Parker, there's virtually zero proven depth there. So that'd be awesome if Darian Mayo can come in and just, hit the ground running.
absolutely. Ryan asks, how huge is it to have 2 years with the Garrett Riley offensive system in place? I mean, obviously, I think it's a big deal. You get, I think, the goal is Cade being more comfortable. This offensive line, the guys you have bring 4 or 5 guys back again. Obviously the glaring weak, hole is at center, but there's a lot of continuity. You're pretty much all your pass catching weapons from last year are back. And that's important. And hopefully, with another year and another full off season in the system, especially for some of these guys that were dealing with injuries last off season, it gives you an opportunity to kind of fine tune some of the things you didn't do well last year, kind of see where you went wrong as far as getting these guys ready, and who are your dogs? Who are you going to be relying on this year? That's what a lot of spring is about. And who am I going to have? Because I don't think Clemson's going to go through the entire spring without guys transferring. So, but it's a big deal. You have to. That continuity means a lot, and the hope is, especially from a quarterback and offensive line standpoint, that those guys have a better understanding and are more comfortable with what they're doing. So, yeah, can't be overstated.
Yeah, look, it's going to be huge. There's obviously a lot of work to do, as you mentioned, and there's a lot of progression that has to happen pretty much at every position on the offense. But again, year 2 in an offensive system, you obviously expect growth. And, I think as Clemson fans, that's exactly what we should expect. Garrett Riley showed in season 1 that he was able to adapt based off of personnel and kind of dial back some stuff and change some stuff. So, hopefully these players, year 2, understanding what he wants out of them, can adapt to his system and start playing a lot better, so that he can start running the offense that he truly wants to run, because that wasn't the offense that he wanted to run last year. Everybody saw it. He said as much. He said there was a personnel issue. So hopefully another offseason, we can kind of correct some of those things and get the personnel where they need to be so that he can call his offense in the way that he wants to. And I think if that stuff happens, obviously this is going to be a very different team and a very different offense. And you think about Clemson's defense. The offense can just help them out a little bit more. This team is in a lot better situation. because this defense is still very, very good.
Absolutely. And yeah, that has to be priority numero uno is, just getting these guys right and on the same page. And because, if you're, it felt like this, the entire year you were calling plays with one hand tied behind your back because offensive line couldn't execute what you were doing. And you had a quarterback that made a ton of freshmen. Well, wasn't a freshman, but made a ton of freshman-like mistakes.
Yeah.
So, that hamstrung everything else, and that makes things difficult. And so,
and
I think having Matt Luke is going to be a big deal. And obviously, I think he has an understanding of what, Clemson wants to be offensively and how to coach to that. And obviously, he's going to work with Garrett Riley and all that to figure out, who needs to be out there. And because both of those guys have seen it and seen what it takes and seen what, explosive offense looks like and what it takes to get that out of those players. So, it's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Just, hopefully it looks easier for Clemson next year. It's 3 years in a row where Clemson's offense has just looked difficult. Everything looks hard. Every yard is a struggle. Hopefully we can turn that around in year 2 under Garrett Riley.
Yeah. Let's do a couple more before we get on out of here. Big Low, good to see you. One of our regulars. He says, I'm late. Y'all talk about Cade next year, expectations. We didn't really, we talked about Cade in different parts, portions, but, we hadn't, dove into expectations. The expectation should be a significant jump as far as production and decision making. I don't expect him to. I think by significant jump, I don't mean like he needs to be a Heisman contender or anything like that. But I think he needs to be able to execute the offense and stay, keep the offense on schedule, because that was one of the things that made things so hard for this team was, you just weren't doing, especially on first and second down, you weren't doing the little things right. There were so many third and longs that Clemson faced this year offensively, made things difficult. And when you're, and obviously it didn't help that, you had those struggles in the run game at times, especially early in the year. But, he has to, his internal processor has to speed up. And he has to be able to make those decisions and also, not press as much when he feels like he has to make a play happen, because bad things happen when he does. So, that's one of the things that he has to, you have to hope he makes those improvements, because it's so much of the struggles this past season could have been avoided if you had a quarterback that was just a little bit more comfortable in the pocket and what he was doing, and as far as making his reads and making the right decision, and also understanding when there are plays there, he's got to hit them, because there were so many times this year where there were plays that missed opportunities, explosive plays, and things of that nature where you either don't throw the ball or the ball is underthrown or it's a late read and it gives the DB a chance. There were just so many things of that nature throughout every game Clemson played this past year, and you were just like, man, it's like the margins are just we're so close. It's like, man, if he had thrown it here instead of holding it an extra second, and maybe it's an incompletion or even worse, a sack or interception or a fumble,
right?
The margins between those types of plays and an explosive play for a touchdown are really small, and so you have to. That's the thing. You have to get his brain working that extra second faster. So that's my long spiel on Cade, but he has to.
Yeah, it's just
he gets better, but we have to see it.
Yeah, it's maturity for Cade. He has to mature as a quarterback, and what that means to me is he's got to be a better decision maker. He's got to become more comfortable in the pocket. He has to know when to hang on to the ball, and when to get rid of it, right? You don't always have to run towards the sideline when you feel pressure. Sometimes stepping up in the pocket and hitting your guys downfield is the answer, right? So becoming more comfortable in the pocket that way, and the game needs to slow down for Cade. It needs to slow down. He needs to be able to go through his progressions, because if you go back and watch a lot of Clemson games this year, there's plays out there, huge plays that were left on the field because either he wasn't going through his progressions, or he didn't see them. Whatever the case may be, they were just missed. Wide open receivers, big plays that could have been made. So he's obviously got to grow there, and just know when to use his. What I really want to see from Cade is know when to use his feet as a weapon, north and south, not running towards the sideline and all that stuff, but know when to gash a defense with your athleticism, because he has the athleticism in order to really hurt a defense, especially when guys are rushing upfield past him, stepping up into those lanes and getting something out of nothing versus hanging on to the ball too long and getting an intentional grounding or a sack or something like that. Turn a negative into a positive. But I think he'll take steps. He knows the way that he played last season was not good enough. I guarantee you he'd be the first one to say that wasn't good enough. So he's going to go into the offseason and try to get better. And, I think he will. We'll see how much better he does get, though.
Yeah. It's a wait. It's a wait and see thing. I mean, and that's how it is with quarterbacks in general. But I think Garrett Riley has proven at multiple stops he knows how to get guys, players ready, and he's got to take that job. It's a different, it's a different expectation, obviously, being at Clemson. But he's done it, and I am not ready to say that. Oh man, Clemson just. At a certain point, it's like it's not the offensive coordinator. You have to, they have to. The quarterback has to, take that personal responsibility as well to get better. And so I think Cade is taking the steps this offseason to do that. So
yep.
We'll see. And spring will interested to hear the returns from spring. I think you're in a better spot personnel wise. From a pass catching standpoint than you were last spring, when there were so many guys that were out, and weren't playing, and it gave you an opportunity to get some of the young guys, snaps and opportunities. But when it came time for the season, some of the guys you were expected to rely on, they didn't get those spring reps, and it hurt some. I think that hurt some as well. So we'll see. And I think you have, having Matt Luke. To truly evaluate where you are from an offensive line standpoint is a big deal as well, and kind of decide who he wants the five to be. Because I think they're going into this offseason not with the idea that, okay, the same four guys are definitely going to start this year in the exact same positions. I think if Dabo is if Dabo is smart, he's going to let Matt Luke kind of evaluate where this group is and figure out where guys fit. And if it's in the same spot they were last year, then perfect. But then also evaluating, it's like, okay, maybe you actually fit better here and you are able to execute what we want you to be able to do better than this guy at this position. And so we're going to flip flop you guys around. I think that has to be on the table. So we'll see. There's a lot of things that go into getting this offense back on track.
Yep.
John asks, is Jordan hoping Cade is taking the offseason steps, or is there some evidence? I mean, I think it's a hope more so than I don't have know any what he's personally done like this offseason. But I don't I don't have people like in Cade's camp that would tell me that kind of stuff. So I don't know, but the hope is he is. We'll see.
I would think he's working. Yeah. It would surprise me if he was not. But
listen, and Cade is a competitor. I don't question his want to be a great quarterback. That's not like I don't get that impression from him. So I think he's going to take the steps needed. But like I said, you have to see it. But yeah, I can't like just go and say like point to, oh, he was at this quarterback camp over in Texas this past week. Like I don't know anything about that. He was with this private quarterback's coach, or he was doing these drills. Like
yeah,
I don't have people in his camp. I don't know. I don't know him personally. So I mean, well, we just have to see.
y'all hit him up. Tell him to come on the show, and we'll ask him.
Yeah. Okay. I said a couple more. This will be our last one from Jeremiah. He says, what do y'all think about Josh Sapp as tight end too? I mean, I think he has a really good opportunity. I mean, I was high on him last year, and I think he showed some things towards the end of the last year. Had a really good bowl game, I think. So where I think that, he's going to be a really quality option as tight end too. I think, he would play more if he offered more of a, well, honestly, outside, I thought he did a good job blocking, but he's not really that traditional attached tight end type. I mean, he's a really athletic body type, really good catch radius. And yeah, he has he has some receiver qualities to him. I'm also high on Olsen Pat Henry, who had a really big catch in the bowl game as well.
Yep.
The tight end room is in a really good spot right now. But I think if Josh Sapp is your tight end too, I'm perfectly okay with that. And
yeah, and he's a guy that played a lot of wide receiver in high school, so
yeah,
that probably contributes to the fact that he's not that inline attached tight end blocker type deal where he's more comfortable being out on the perimeter blocking the safeties and the corners and the guys like that. Obviously, than he is, chipping off that DN or moving up to a linebacker position or something like that. So, not that he can't develop in that way. It's just, he was a freshman last year. He's never really been asked to do that type of stuff, specifically in high school. So probably a little bit of a learning curve transition type deal for him. But as far as a pass catcher, I mean, he can be as good as there is. He can absolutely stretch the field and make it a very uncomfortable situation for those linebackers.
Yeah, John Sari mentions Marcus Dixon as well. Yeah, and yeah, I haven't forgot about him. And he's still there. Obviously, he was a true freshman with Olsen Pat Henry last year. I think he has. I think he has a bigger body type. He's more of that traditional tight end build. But we'll see what kind of strides he makes in the spring as well. But yeah, I think this is a really good tight end room with Christian Bentonker coming in as well. So you're in a really good spot. Let me see. I said this was the last one, so we're gonna stop it here.
All right, guys. We're gonna go ahead and shut it down for the night. We've been on here just over an hour and 46 minutes here. Still got 33 people in the live chat. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us for the entire show. Before you head out of here, please go ahead and hit that like button for us. We appreciate all you guys coming in, hanging out with me and Jordan, chopping it up about Clemson football, getting in the comment section, interacting with us. Just appreciate your guys' support. Don't forget, we will be right back here next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. So be here to hang out with us. We'll be doing this show every Thursday, 7 p.m. throughout the off season. For the most part, I'm not saying times won't change based off of things that come up, but 7 p.m. Thursday is our time. Also, remember, if you guys are watching this in the rewatch, if you didn't get to catch us live, thank you so much for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Check out the timestamps that we'll post for our individual topics that we talked about if you don't want to just watch the entire hour, 50 minutes that we were on here. So, again, thank you guys for showing up. Jordan, send the people off.
Yeah, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in once again. Another great show and just a big week in Clemson football right now. So really excited to come back next Thursday and kind of talk about that and some of the other news going on around college football, because it's going to be a long off season. So there's not always going to be a ton of stuff to talk about, but obviously recruiting keeps you busy. But we also like to keep an update on some of the things around college football as well. So we'll be there to talk about that as well. And again, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next Thursday.
All right, guys. Until next time, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.